Hold on. What? Was what I believe Mendeecees said merely said? Kirk's private company shouldn't even be that close to his name, let alone his baby. Well, let's break this out, because Mendeecees just dropped a bombshell that left the entire cast and the entire fan base speechless in one of the most jaw-dropping scenes in the history of love and hip-hop, Atlanta. Mendeecees leaned forward, gazed into space, and uttered the words aloud. He got an obsession with my penis, as the cameras were rolling and the atmosphere was tense. Indeed. Yes, you heard correctly. And the aforementioned he? Kirk Frost. That's who. The fans were shocked by what they heard. Silently, the cast blinked. Kirk too? The dude was frozen like a mannequin baby. Mendeecees didn't stop there, though. Chile. I had to pause the video and clutch my pearls as he continued to swing, slandering Jasmine, discussing entanglements, and then striking us with the year's most memorable line. It's not my penis. It's my presence. The public is now curious as to what Kirk's true situation is and why he is under so much pressure. Do not be concerned. We have the complete breakdown, and I promise you won't be prepared for what follows. Everyone assumed it would be another standard, tense sit-down when the cameras started rolling. Even Mendeecees seemed to be in a relaxed mood. The atmosphere was low, and Scrappy was half joking. But beneath the surface, you could see something simmering. How, at hearing Kirk's name, his eyes narrowed. How he didn't share the group's laughter. Yes, he had been carrying a large object on his chest. And he was about to spill the beans, baby. It all began when Scrappy asked Mendeecees if he and Yandy were truly married in an attempt to spark a conversation. As in, lawfully. Not TV married, not a hip-hop ceremony and love marriage. However, the state of New York acknowledges that it is married. As well as Mendeecees. He grinned, laughed it off, danced around it as if it didn't exist. After looking down and cracking his neck, he eventually responded, "Bro, why is everyone so upset? About what my wife and I are doing? That ought to have been the first indication that something wasn't right." However, as usual, Scrappy pushed. And just as things were about to get awkward, the Mendes abruptly changed course. "No, see what's really getting to me ain't the blogs. Or the comments," he added, looking directly ahead. "Kirk." The room fell silent. As someone repositioned their chair, you could hear their bracelet jingle, because nobody was prepared for him to utter that name. Not in that way. He spoke from the bottom of his heart. Kirk's speech has been slick, behind his back, all around his name, and above all, regarding his connection. Kirk has been in his business more than the fans, according to Mendeecees, as well as Rashida. She has allegedly been contributing as well. Mendeecees expressed his fatigue with the phony smiles and sarcastic remarks, weary of feigning love. When in private, Kirk was joking, probing, and allowing Rashida to take pictures on camera as though it were adorable. But then things went crazy. Wild, like unhinged. Mendeecees leaned forward and delivered that now famous statement to the room. "The man is obsessed with my penis." Everyone froze. "I have never seen anything like it." Scrappy's mouth fell open. Off camera, the producer in the back coughed. And no one knew whether they were meant to laugh, take offense, or simply act as though he hadn't said it. He doubled down, though. Kirk reportedly kept an eye on him at all times, wondering where he went, who he was with, and why Yandy was still with him. "Why are you observing me so intently?" he inquired. "You're my woman, or what?" And he simply shook his head and remarked, "It's scary now," when no one else spoke. I'm beginning to believe he wants to see it, the way he discusses it. Everyone was too startled to talk at that time. Mendeecees? Even Scrappy said, Yo, I don't even want to hear about no old man duck talk." He gave a small giggle, but it was clear that this wasn't a joke. He meant it. Exhausted. Tired. Claimed that he believed him and Kirk to be dogs, that they supported one another. However, he now observes Kirk allowing his wife to bring up his name, posing dubious queries about Yandy, and turning everything into a conversation when it isn't appropriate. The Jasmine stuff followed. It seems that someone informed Mendeecees that Kirk was upset with him because he was tampering with Jasmine. Yes, Jasmine. As in Kirk's long-term headache, baby mom, and former flame. They were regarded as insane by Mendeecees. Why would I want his leftovers? He asked. Straight face, not even a smile, only the facts. He thinks I can't get the main course? He asked, and everyone began to whisper at that point, because Kirk's excessive talking was no longer the only issue. It was now about Kirk being in danger. Mendeecees claimed that while Kirk was behaving like the guy, he was always glancing sideways to see who Yandy was speaking to or what people were saying about him. I'm not trying to compete with you, bro, he said. I will not be holding a PSS contest. I'm not in that kind of race, he said, but he wasn't finished yet. He continued, criticizing Kirk for being strange and resentful. Declared, "This man is more concerned with where my deck is going than with his own fucking marriage." Wow, Mendeecees blasted them with the coldest line of the night when someone attempted to soothe it by suggesting that perhaps it was simply the pressure or that Kirk was feeling the heat. It's not my penis. I'm here. There was a halt, like the quiet of a funeral house, as it was more than just shade. That read like a textbook. He claimed that when he enters a room, people take notice that he doesn't have a lot to do, and Kirk is genuinely irritated by that. Not Jasmine, not Yandy, not the blogs, but that Mendeecees still possess the same level of vitality that Kirk wishes he did. That vibe, that serene assurance, that genuine manly spirit. Additionally, it's possible that Kirk has been observing too closely because he secretly envies it. However, what truly made people gasp was how composed Mendeecees was throughout this entire oration. As though he had been putting it off for weeks, months, simply allowing things to simmer till he reached his breaking point. And the fact that he broadcasted on television? Chilly. He was unconcerned about friendship agreements, no protection, for the VH1 brand. He was letting his truth burn while he spoke it. In an attempt to lighten the situation, Scrappy joked that he didn't want to hear about anyone's Johnson on a Monday afternoon, but it was unsuccessful. The atmosphere was extremely dense, too uncooked, too bare. In the background, you could see the producers debating whether to cut to the commercial or leave it alone. Mendeecees wasn't done, though. Not even close. This isn't simply television. Drama, he remarked. This actual life. This is his family, his name, his spouse, and he won't allow any mature guy to continue to play in his face, even though he doesn't give a damn about what the fans or blogs have to say. Especially not one who, while allowing his own wife to cause trouble for other people's marriages, preaches fidelity and marriage ideals on screen. He referred to it as hypocritical. Fake. Claimed that Kirk has been behaving like a petty young girl in private and like a minister in public. And the room truly changed at that point. Even though Rosita wasn't present, her name kept appearing. Mendeecees claimed she had something slick to say about Yandy no matter what. Whether it's backstage before filming, in the glam room, or on camera. Small insults, brief remarks. They land like daggers despite their constant pretense of being jokes. And Kirk? He simply sits and allows things to occur. She is never checked, never stands up for his alleged friend. Simply observes everything unfold as if it were unimportant. Mendeecees claimed that the fact that Kirk behaves one way in private and another while the red light is on was what made it worse. In private, he is a buddy-buddy. Love, provide, guidance. However, as soon as filming begins, he starts chatting crazily, grinning at shade, and allowing Rosita to take shots as if it were open season. As well as Mendeecees, he's finished. He declared that he would prefer to be by himself than to smile at a fake, and the whole atmosphere changed in an instant. Scrappy appeared uneasy. Something was said to the sound guy by one of the producers. When the Mendeecees started acting, there was no stopping him. Thus, the atmosphere in the room changed from "we're filming a scene" to "we might need security." Tell me when you're prepared to move on to the next section, and I'll continue where this left off. As if he was at a loss for words, Scrappy sat back in his chair and tapped the side of his cup. Even though he was rarely rendered speechless, he could sense how serious the situation had suddenly become. There was no Mendeecees playing. He had discarded every semblance of civility and pulled back every layer, and his voice, which never broke, that steady, deep voice he maintained throughout, that intensified the impact. So it didn't sound angry. It had the sound of a man who had been suppressing too much for too long. Mendeecees maintained a forward gaze, didn't blink, didn't falter. He claimed to have seen Kirk act like a big brother, give him advice, and smile in his face for years. But jealousy lurked behind that smile, and a need to compete lay beneath. That envy. Not merely to attract attention, not for watching television, just for confirmation. And Kirk began looking for further ways to undermine Mendeecees after that validation failed. Like turning Rosita into a weapon. Similar to spreading small rumors. Like telling sleazy jokes that don't feel funny. It began slowly, he claimed. Everything felt cool when the first season returned to the set. However, the tension started as soon as Yundi had more screen time, more glow, and more plot. He claimed to have seen Kirk exchange glances, making those phony chuckles that convey more than just words. And he observed that Kirk always had a question, remark, or grin when someone inquired about his wife. It happened just as planned. Mendeecees repeatedly reminded himself to disregard it, to ascend above it, to remain stable. But he realized it wasn't just a vibe. It was a setup when it began to seep into scenes, blogs, and backstage rumors. How would you feel if a man kept talking about your relationship like he was sleeping in your bed? He asked, turning to Scrappy. Scrappy didn't respond at all. He simply shook his head and wiped his face, as they all knew in their hearts that the border had been crossed. Mendeecees then mentioned something that nobody had anticipated. It seems that Kirk had made a secret contact with Yundi, DM, late at night, declared his care for her to be concerned, because he believed she was investing too much in an unstable relationship. Mendeecees claimed that although he didn't want to make a big deal out of it, Yundi showed him the message, tried to ignore it. Perhaps Kirk was just keeping an eye on things. But now, with everything else that's happening, that message struck a different chord. It appeared to be manipulation now, similar to Kirk's attempt to play both sides. As though he intended to gradually chip away at their basis until something broke. Mendeecees remarked, "How do you say you're my boy, but you're sowing seeds in my wife's mind behind my back?" He claimed that the disrespect was subtle rather than overt, and it got worse because of that. Because they could have resolved their differences amicably if Kirk had spoken up and expressed his feelings. However, he allowed it to fester instead, allow it to develop, and then seemed to be surprised when Mendeecees finally lost it. The remark regarding the penis wasn't the only thing. It focused on all the events leading up to that point. The accumulation, the treachery, the phony affection. Mendeecees claimed that although he didn't want to go there, he had no choice. Because you must ultimately reply if someone keeps calling your name. To the supporters, no, not to the blogs. But to the man who is feigning concern while he stands across from you. He continued by saying that Kirk had been acting strangely for some time. Claimed that he learned last year that Kirk was attempting to bring Jasmine back to the program, not for plot reasons, but rather to stir things up. To determine whether Mendeecees would fall for the ruse, to wreak havoc in his household. And Kirk flipped it after that failed, began behaving as though he was the objective, as though Mendeecees was attempting to meddle in his affairs. However, Kirk was behind the scenes planning the drama the entire time. And now he was bold enough to pretend to be the victim? Chilly. "Look, man, I don't know what y'all got going on, but this shot feel deep," muttered Scrappy at last. And it was true. Deeper than the majority of them understood. Because Mendeecees wasn't merely discussing a friend who had crossed the line. He was discussing the breakdown of trust, discusses the one-sided nature of loyalty, about secretly hope you collapse while you watch someone pose as your brother. The worst thing, he claimed, was realizing that Yundi had also experienced that intensity. For months, she remained silent, made an effort to remain elegant, made an effort to stay out of the mess. However, every time Rosita questioned the commitment of the Mendeecees or made a remark about their fake marriage, Yundi would return, home exhausted and reticent. She was opposed to using fire to put out fire. Mendeecees, however, could see it eating away at her, and he felt powerless as a result, as if he couldn't shield her from the shade that was thrown in her face and behind her back. He claimed it began to have an impact on their house, the persistent gossip, the conjecture, the fans' inquiries about their continued relationship. Producers are pressuring them to appear real on camera, and Kirk and Rashida sat pretty, pretending to have the ideal recipe during it all. Mendeecees stated that he was at his breaking point, and for that reason he finally spoke. He also disclosed information that he had kept to himself. A few weeks prior to the filming of that scenario, a meeting was held. Crew, actors, and producers, behind the scenes, the notion of a confrontation moment between Kirk and Mendeecees has been raised. A sitting position. Tension that is not resolved, and Mendeecees stated that first, he thought it would be professional, so he accepted. Adult. Something they could crush. However, he later discovered that Kirk had been giving the producers small sound bites beforehand, giving clues that Mendeecees may be concealing something, that when it came to Yandy, he wasn't being authentic. Mendeecees then understood that it was about ambush rather than resolve. "You made me look like a liar," he remarked. "Like a liar." The most painful thing was that it sounded like some slick-talking false husband. Not the cameras, not the web. But being aware that his real life will be transformed into a reality TV stunt by someone he had shared a meal with. Mendeecees took a breath and remarked, "I ain't perfect," while the room sat heavy with stillness. "I never claimed to be. However, I take care of my business. I look after mine, and I don't need a man to follow me around like I'm in a soap show." He went on to say that the jokes didn't even make him angry. "Speak your mind. Have a good laugh. However, when do you begin to enter my marriage? When you sit there silently while your wife starts talking recklessly? You are now tampering with my legacy." Scrappy gave a slow nod. Now he got it. It wasn't beef. Years of phony camaraderie were encased in betrayal, and there was no turning back as the Mendeecees ripped back the curtain. What followed would be even more drastic. Because just when you thought the truth was out, there was more to come. Secret. Texts, past relationships coming back to haunt you, and a startling confession that took everyone by surprise. And this time, things were about to change in a way that Kirk never anticipated. It began with a glance. Merely a glance. Mendeecees stopped in the middle of his statement, leaned forward, and lowered his voice a bit, already anticipating that whatever came next wouldn't be light. Scrappy shifted in his chair, and he was correct. Because the tension reached a new height with Mendeecees' next statement. He said that Kirk had been speaking to someone else in addition to causing friction, with Rashida and sowing doubts about his marriage. Someone from the past. Someone who ought to have stayed away. Jasmine. Mendeecees made no hesitation at all. Uttered her name as if he had been suppressing it for weeks. Apparently, a few months ago, Jasmine had contacted him. Initially, nothing significant. Only a direct message. Something informal. Even friendly. Stated that she was attempting to set the record straight on some things Kirk had told her. Stated that although she didn't want to be involved in any controversy, she thought that some things had to be expressed. And what did she say? Mendeecees claimed that it almost caused him to topple over, as a result of Kirk telling Jasmine that Mendeecees had been checking in on her, said he has concerns regarding her present partnership, that he was trying to find out if she was unmarried, all falsehoods, total fabrication. Mendeecees claimed that he had never inquired about Jasmine, never once glanced in her direction, and had no desire to go back and clean up any of that stuff. However, Kirk gave the impression that he was hiding, as though he was performing in the background, and Jasmine believed it, whether she was being naive or cunning. What kind of man uses his baby mama to lure his own friend into scandal? Mendeecees asked, and he meant it. To him, this wasn't television drama. This was against the law. He claimed that Kirk was aware of the onlookers in the streets, was aware of the blog's hunger, and Kirk served him up rather than shielding him, made him a news story. And for what purpose? Influence? Authority? Or was there more to it than that? Scrappy straightened his posture. Messy women and careless pals were nothing new to him, but this? There was more to this. "Do you think Kirk is attempting to separate you and Yandy?" he inquired. Mendeecees didn't even light up. "I think he wants to see us crack," he remarked. "Not due to his hatred of us. However, he hates that we survived what he was unable to. That statement struck a deep chord, as everyone was aware that Kirk and Rashida had endured a lot. Adultery, outdoors infants, humiliated in public. Mendeecees and Yandy were still together nevertheless, still appearing robust. They were standing despite the imperfections, the rumors, and the flimsy documents. And perhaps, just possibly, that set Kirk off. According to the Mendeecees, Kirk constantly weighing their marriage like a scale, as if he was keeping track. Who is more devoted? Who is more genuine? Who is more popular? Then he began acting strangely when the scoreboard didn't favor him, saying slick shti, bringing up outdated names, and the most unpleasant aspect? Pretending to be concerned, he did it. He claimed that Kirk had the enthusiasm of a phony mentor, continually offering unsolicited advice and discussing how to keep your woman, but never ever glancing in the mirror. How are you going to teach me how to love my wife when yours doesn't even trust you at the grocery store? Mendeecees asked, and it felt like a kick to the belly. Since everyone in the room was aware of the reality of that, he continued by saying, that dysfunction is what Kirk thrives on. That chaos is when he feels most at ease. And Kirk wasn't sure what to do when Mendeecees and Yandy didn't break up after the long-distance stretch, after the drama, or after prison. He then began to pluck cords, murmuring, prodding, wishing that something will blow up at last, and right now, it had. In an attempt to maintain composure, Scrappy suggested that it might have been ego. Kirk might have felt supplanted, as though he needed to get things going since the limelight was waning. Mendeecees, however, didn't believe it. This wasn't for celebrity, he said. It had to do with energy. Some guys get inspired when you walk into a room and people listen. Others become intimidated. Kirk isn't motivated. He was irritated. He added something more profound as well. Something with sluggish nodding and scruffy squinting. Kirk isn't used to being around men who don't need him, according to Mendeecees, who are not afraid of him. It made sense. Who doesn't beg him to co-sign their moves? Since Kirk had been working on this program as the model for years. The senior, reason's voice, at least in his own head. However, the place suddenly had a fresh vibe, one that didn't require permission, one without a kiss on the ring. And Kirk was unable to handle it, and the real bomb was dropped by Mendeecees. There was a production meeting, he said, away from the camera, private, no microphones. Kirk allegedly stated, "We gotta bring some heat this season," during the discussion. It could be time to reveal some information on Mendeecees, as if it were a tactic. He was written into chaos like a character. When it was mentioned to Mendeecees, he was finished. At that moment, he realized that there was no friendship left to defend. No bond is worth preserving. I'd rather be alone than eat at a table where the knife already under my seat, he remarked, glancing at Scrappy. Don't shout. Don't be theatrical. Only the facts. And it was even more chilly because of that. Additionally, he felt that Yandy had been silent for too long. She didn't want to think that Kirk and Rashida would act in that manner. They seemed solid to her, a power couple, someone with whom one can identify. However, Rashida would always make it into a competition whenever she attempted to connect. Who wore it more effectively? They did a better job with their men, who recovered more powerfully, and she didn't play such games, Yandy. She now recognizes the pattern, though, the smoothness, the way Rashida always had a smile on her face when Yandy was in pain, as if it were amusement. He is not here to defend phony peace, according to Mendeecees. No more. I will respond if you bring me up. I will doubt your loyalty if you doubt mine. And I will speak up if you attempt to split up my family. You could feel the strain in your throat because it was so heavy in the room. Scratch Pie had stopped drinking altogether, simply keeping it. Nodding. Mendeecees are allowed to talk. Because this was no longer a trivial argument. This constituted personal betrayal. A wound that was too deep to be closed with a hasty group, hug, or an apology, as well as Mendeecees. I'm not looking for resolution, he stated. He is seeking distance. He claimed that the worst snakes are those that smile. I don't need Kirk to like me. I just need him to stop acting like he does. And Kirk was smiling broadly at the moment, venom on his tongue. He said something that sounded like a warning to halt the moment, not only to Kirk, but to all the players on both sides. "Don't use my name for your plot," he said. "Silence is a choice," he continued. "Don't drag my wife for your arc. And don't ever think I won't speak up just because I've been quiet. Not a flaw." And the reason he decides to speak is that the truth requires witnesses. There was silence in the room, no music, no wounds, just tense faces and rough air, and no one moved despite the fact that the cameras were still recording. The last thing anyone wanted was to ruin that moment. Since everyone was aware that the harm had already been done, the confidence was broken, they had drawn the lines, and there would be a lot more people watching than just fans the next time Kirk attempted to speak. No one moved, not even when the cameras finally stopped. Everyone in the room knows they just watched something that cannot be remedied by a scripted apology sequence next week, and it was one of those moments where reality TV becomes real life. Mendeecees leaned back in his chair, clearly not arrogant or irritated. Now that his message had arrived, he could no longer control it. Word began to circulate later that day. Whispering producers, crew members texting one another. What transpired was already disclosed to a blogger who was observing the production crew on set. They didn't even hold off until the program aired. By midnight, the quote was on the timeline. "He became obsessed with my penis, and then everything went haywire." Fan pages went viral. A field day was had by meme accounts. Twitter was a battleground. And Kirk? Extremely quiet all of a sudden. He didn't share anything, remained silent, didn't return the clap. Rosita went live once, showcasing a skincare product and a new wig while acting as if nothing had happened. However, the commenters wouldn't let it go. Fans' questions about why your husband is so worried about Mendeecees' private parts drowned out anything she said. It was humiliating. You can't buy your way out of this type of public humiliation. Mendeecees remained silent after that. He let the video do the talking. But Yandy? The internet went crazy when she shared a picture of the two of them with the message, "Unbothered, unshaken, unmatched." It was shady, according to some. It was considered classy by some. But that was a message. Everyone agreed. Rosita noticed it. Her subsequent tweet contained a subtly placed quote that seemed more like a sub than a statement. "Real women fix each other's crowns." However, the online drama continued. Kirk was in damage control mode behind the scenes, phoning the producers, requesting that the video be edited to be softer, attempting to portray the discussion as a misunderstanding rather than the expose that it was. Mendeecees had no desire to make anything softer. Simply put, he instructed the team to air it as it happened. They listened when I said, "Let's be real if you guys want to be real on TV." Opinions began to flow in as information spread to the other cast members. Carly Red claimed that she had always thought Kirk was envious of the serene way the Mendeecees moved. Scrappy informed a teammate that he admired the way Mendeecees handled it and that he hoped more men would express themselves in the same way. Even Bambi, who doesn't often get involved in other people's problems, is said to have told a stylist that Kirk needed to learn how to manage his marriage. But Spice had the most unexpected response. She wasn't in the room when it happened, but she shared the video with the suspicious message, "Not the Duck Chronicles Chile," and laughing emojis. And precise. Since the scene had already gone viral, and everywhere, not just on hip-hop and love pages, it was even being picked up by blogs that don't typically discuss the series. It was too crazy to overlook. Kirk finally answered, not with a video, not with a post, but in a candid interview that was shown a few weeks later. You could tell he was uncomfortable even though he was trying to be calm by claiming that Mendeecees misunderstood his intentions and that he never meant to disrespect him or his marriage. Rigid. He chose his words carefully, as if navigating a minefield. And the fans didn't believe it. He was enlightened by the comments. He was allegedly deflecting. Others said he felt ashamed. And the worst ones? Fans are doubting his personal connection and wondering why he always seems to care more about other people's romantic relationships than tidying up his own home. It was cruel. Additionally, Kirk, a man who takes pleasure in remaining low-key solid, was unprepared for this type of attention. Mendeecees had pulled all the way back in the pack. Not trivial, not spiteful, only far away. He remained silent when they met. For the following cast meeting. Didn't give a nod. Simply passed Kirk as if he didn't exist. And that quiet? It was more powerful than any on-camera reading could possibly be. Even Rosita appeared uneasy, as though she was aware that what had been damaged could not be fixed. The change became apparent to those around them. The phony giggles had vanished. The dinners in the group were uncomfortable, as well as the production crew. They adored it. Because the drama wasn't staged for once. It was authentic, uncooked, and without filtering. According to reports, the criticism wasn't what upset Kirk the most. Mendeecees didn't attempt to correct it off camera, which was the problem. No texts. No calls, nothing but quiet. Mendeecees just replied, "I said what I said," when Kirk did contact them through a third party. No justification, no way back, no kumbaya. Only the truth. Some attempted to place the blame on the producers, claimed that they started the incident, that they played both sides to stir things up because they were desperate for ratings. Mendeecees, however, claimed that this moment has been building for years. All it needed was the appropriate trigger. Then it was game over when Kirk started acting strangely, went too far, and repeatedly brought up the subject of another man's body in conversation. The fact that supporters began attacking Kirk and Rashida together was what intensified the situation. Not only because to the scene, but also due to the background, the dishonesty, the drama of the baby mama. Rosita looked away during those moments. The fact that they had the audacity to criticize someone else's love story in spite of everything. It seemed contradictory. And supporters remember, Mendeecees and Yandy, however, remained silent. No clapbacks, no live tirades, only a few posts that depict them going about their lives. Fittings that match. Pictures from a trip. A video shows the Mendeecees dancing in the kitchen with the sound of Yandy laughing. It was supple, simple, and above all, it appeared to be tranquility. Something that production cannot script and money cannot fake. And Kirk? Well, he became less noticeable, attempted to shift attention. Began sharing more content regarding music, nostalgia, and throwback vibes. However, the remarks continued to pull him back. Someone would remind him of whatever he posted. But why are you observing another man's deek? It turned into a joke, a hashtag, a tattoo on the plot of the season. However, the message was delivered, not only to Kirk, but to anyone who happens to be observing. It wasn't appropriate to play with Mendeecees. He may feel at ease, he may go low. However, if you go too far with his name, his wife, or his masculinity, he will bring you together in public, politely and without hesitation. And how he carried it out? Don't yell. No clout chase, only the truth. Supplied with a level of accuracy that goes far beyond shadow. The tension was still high by the time of the reunion. People speculating on Kirk's appearance, if he were even acknowledged by Mendeecees, if Rosita maintained the same level of vigor, and the producers attempted to fabricate a moment when they were in the same room once more. Complete the circle. Mendeecees, however, had little interest in finding closure. Not while the harm was still being done. Not after Faith was buried. He sat there then. Awesome, gathered, and quiet. And the quiet was a powerful statement. What comes next now that everything is public knowledge, without any edits, filters, or false calm for the cameras? Kirk revealed himself in a number of ways, and no apology or justification has ever made things right. Mendeecees arrived with presence, integrity, and a self-assurance that doesn't require support. And the quiet? It wasn't shade. Power was that. Because a guy does not need to argue about what he is not when he is aware of who he is. While Rosita tried to act as though no one was sneering at her family, Yandy remained by her guy, composed. The cast is being cautious, blogs are showing the video repeatedly, and fans are still giddy. Because once someone reveals what actually happens when the cameras stop, once they mention the quiet bit aloud, it cannot be unheard. The true question now is Kirk truly envious? Or did he simply forget who his true rival was? Was the Jasmine ever the main topic? Or was it merely a diversion from the reality that Mendeecees have what Kirk claims to have? Peace, respect, and a lady who doesn't. Have to be ashamed to show her love for him in public? Leave your comments with your ideas. Was Mendeecees simply past due, or was it out of line? Was it worse for Kirk to remain silent, or should he have answered at all? In your opinion, did Rosita contribute to the problem, or was she only caught in the crossfire? To ensure you never miss a post from us, remember to press the bell, like this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. You should wait to see what comes next if you think this was messy, baby.